Tony, a hard-working taxi driver doing his best to make ends meet, encountered a distressed woman one late night. She was visibly upset, clutching her young child, and desperately needed a ride. Feeling her despair, Tony drove her home, and when she tried to pay, he kindly refused. It was clear to him that she was going through something difficult. Tony had no idea that this small act of generosity would soon turn his life around in unimaginable ways. Only a few hours later, his phone would ring with news that would leave him speechless. Hello everyone and welcome to Mystic Tales. Today I'm excited to share an inspiring new story with you. Later that night as Tony lay in bed, he couldn't shake thoughts of the woman and her child. Refusing payment was rare for him as every bit of income counted, but there was something unique about her situation that moved him deeply. He wondered what had caused her distress and what hardships she might have been facing. As he drifted off to sleep, his phone suddenly buzzed on the nightstand. Receiving a call so late was unusual and he hesitated, but a feeling urged him to answer. On the other end of the line was a calm yet urgent voice, one he didn't recognize. "Are you Tony, the taxi driver?" the voice asked. Confused, Tony confirmed his identity. The caller then explained that he was calling on behalf of the woman he'd driven home that night. Tony's heart skipped a beat, worrying that something might have happened to her. "She's safe, but there's something important we need to discuss," the man continued. He explained that the woman hadn't wanted to share her story earlier but had recounted Tony's kind gesture to those close to her. "It's something we won't forget," the caller added. Tony sat up in bed, now fully alert as the caller went on to share a surprising revelation. The woman he'd helped came from a wealthy family but had distanced herself from them after a tragic event. She had tried to build a life on her own, facing one hardship after another. That night she had reached a breaking point, feeling completely overwhelmed. She was going through one of the hardest moments of her life, the man said. "And in that moment, you showed her the kindness she desperately needed." Tony's head spun as he tried to process what he was hearing. He had only done what felt right, but why was he being told this now? Before he could ask more questions, the man paused, then revealed something that took Tony by surprise. The woman's family had learned of his kindness and wanted to meet him. In disbelief, Tony wondered why her family would want to meet him. After all, he had simply refused payment for a ride. But he sensed there was more to the story than he knew. The caller provided an address, asking if Tony could come by the following day. Though he was uncertain and hesitant, Tony's curiosity eventually won him over. The next morning, Tony found himself standing outside an imposing mansion, a home like nothing he'd ever entered before. He'd only seen houses like this from the outside while driving passengers through wealthier neighborhoods. He never imagined he'd find himself walking into such a grand home. With a mix of nerves and excitement, Tony pressed the doorbell. In seconds, the door opened and he was greeted by an older man in a suit, the same voice from the phone call. "Tony, thank you for coming," the man said warmly, introducing himself as John, a close family friend. As Tony followed him inside, he couldn't help but notice the luxurious surroundings, the polished floors, the exquisite artwork on the walls. Everything radiated wealth. They soon entered a spacious sitting room where the woman from the previous night was waiting. This time, she looked calm and composed, the sadness that had overwhelmed her face before now faded. She stood as Tony approached, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Tony, I can't thank you enough," she began. "Last night I was at my lowest. I didn't know how I'd get through it and then you showed up. You didn't ask for anything in return, you just helped. Not many people would do that." Tony shifted uncomfortably, and used to receiving so much attention for what he saw as a simple act of kindness. But before he could reply, John spoke up. "There's something you need to understand, Tony. This family has faced its own struggles. Though they're well off, they've had their share of pain. Your help meant more than you realize. You reminded us that genuine kindness still exists." Tony listened, still unsure of where this was all leading, but then John shared something that left him speechless. He took a pause, choosing his words carefully before revealing, "The family you helped isn't just wealthy, they're highly influential. They own several businesses in the city, and they've always believed in using their resources to uplift others, to give back to those who show kindness without expecting anything in return." Tony felt a wave of confusion. He hadn't expected anything back for his gesture. It had simply been an act of compassion. But John continued, "They feel that your kindness shouldn't go unrecognized. They want to offer you an opportunity that could change your life." Tony's heart raced. A life-changing opportunity? He couldn't grasp how his small act could lead to something so impactful. He listened intently as John explained that the family wanted to give him a financial gift, enough to pay off his debts and provide security for his future. But there was more. They were also offering him a position within one of their businesses, a chance at a stable job, a good income, and the possibility for advancement. Stunned, Tony tried to process it all. It felt as though every struggle he had endured was suddenly being lifted. After years of grueling hours, barely making it by, his life was being transformed in an instant. The woman approached him, looking deeply moved. "That night you didn't realize it, but you gave me hope. I felt as if I'd lost everything, but your kindness reminded me that there are still good people in this world. This is our way of saying thank you." Tony was at a loss for words. He'd always believed that kindness was a reward in itself, but now he was being offered something far beyond anything he had ever dreamed. He realized in that moment that even the smallest acts of kindness can have a profound impact, not just on others but on his own life as well. Tony left the meeting in awe, his mind racing as he tried to absorb everything he had just experienced. Tony had gone from stressing over his next bill to being offered not only financial stability but a career that could redefine his life. It felt surreal, like a dream come true, but it was all real, and it had begun with a single act of kindness. In the days that followed, Tony started his new role within the family's business. At first, he faced challenges, but he quickly picked up the skills needed and began to genuinely enjoy his work. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the constant weight of financial strain. He had a future to look forward to, one that, until now, had seemed impossible. Yet more than the money or the new position, what mattered most to Tony was the knowledge that his kindness had left a true impact on someone's life. The woman and her family stayed connected with him, and over time they became much more than just colleagues. They became friends. Tony found himself welcomed into a group that valued him not just for his actions that night, but for the person he was. One evening, as he sat at home reflecting on the journey that had unfolded, he came to an important realization. Life had been tough, but he had never allowed it to rob him of his compassion for others. That compassion had opened doors he'd never thought possible. The ripple effect of kindness was real, and sometimes, it could change a life in ways beyond imagination. Tony's story was living proof of this. If this story touched your heart, tap that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories like this. Share a single word in the comments to let us know how it made you feel.